من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الأطيبين الأنجبين بهم نتولى ومن أعدائهم نتبرأ إلى الله اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Well, it's the first session of this surah and it's known as Surat al-Hujuraat. It's the 49th surah of the Holy Quran. Hujuraat means chambers. It has 18 ayat, and this surah is also known as Suratul Akhlaq, Suratul Adab. Etiquettes have been mentioned in this beautiful surah. We'll talk a little bit about the fadilat, the virtues of the surah, and then inshallah slowly we'll get into the adab, the etiquettes that we need to know and observe. With reference to this Surat al-Hujurat, which was revealed in Medina, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, he says, "Man katabaha wa allaqaha alayhi fi qitalin aw khusumatin nasarahu Allah ta'ala wa futiha lahu babu kulli khair." That is, someone who writes this surah and then he has it on him, he will be protected and he will be granted victory in whatever combat or whatever task he embarks on, he will be given victory by the Almighty Allah, by the barakah of this surah. Elsewhere in another quote he says, "Man qara'a suratul hujurat utiya min al-ajri 10 hasanat بعدد كل من أطاع الله ورسوله ومن عصاه." Says, whosoever recites this surah, the reward that would be given to you will be 10 times the count of those who have been obedient to Allah and obedient to His Prophet, and also disobedient to Allah and His Prophet. So you'll see the count of people. How many have been obedient? For example, 20 billion. How many have been disobedient? 700 billion, for example. 720 billion multiplied by 10, that much of an ajr and reward will be given to you for reciting this surah. So that is the fadilat and the ajr mentioned by the Holy Prophet. Again, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, "Man qara'a suratul hujurat fi kulli laylatin aw fi kulli yawm," one who recites it during the day or at night. في كل يوم كان من زوار محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم. He will be among the visitors and the zuwar of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Again, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says that if you want to be protected from the shayateen of all forms and formats, and if you want to be safe from every evil, again recite this surah, and it has got all those beautiful protections that you can have, and you would need to be safe from the evil of all these conspirators or evil of shayateen. So Quran has that beautiful effect. It repels evil, it repels shaitan. First of all, not everyone gets the tawfiq to come to Quran, and then reciting the Holy Quran, then trying to understand the ayat of Quran. All these are levels that are the opportunities. Allah, He has to pick someone, He has to bestow that tawfiq. Inna hadaynahu sabil, imma shakiran wa imma kafura. Allah guides. Some are grateful, some are ungrateful. But then for Him to guide also, we have to avail that guidance and that desire within ourselves, and then we ask Allah to help us to understand and to guide us on the right path. So that is regarding this Suratul Hujuraat, some of the fadail that were mentioned by the Ma'asumin. One of the other ahadith that talks about this beautiful surah, it says that Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allah wa rasulih. Now that's the first ayah of the surah. That is, O you who believe, do not trespass or do not overtake. La tuqaddimu, do not precede. Do not precede over Allah and His Rasul. But that is, you have to be behind the Prophet. You have to be behind the command of God. Obedience means that you have to take the command and then follow the commander. That is obedience. Always be behind the commander and take the command from the commander, that is Allah and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam. Now, why was this surah revealed? And then when we talk about the surah and the adab that have been mentioned throughout the surah, there are very beautiful tips that have been mentioned. This surah was revealed for a tribe of Tamim. That's the name of the tribe. And the reporter over here, he says that I inquired as to why the surah was revealed. There he was informed that this tribe of Bani Tamim, they used to come to visit the Prophet, and they used to stand outside the chambers. Now those of you who've been to Medina, the house of Rasulullah, it's a very humble dwelling, very small in size as well. And then there were so many rooms, and all the wives of the Prophet, they were all living in those rooms, those chambers, those Hujuraat. And very humble dwelling made of palm tree leaves and bamboo sticks. That was the rooftop, and the walls of that were very humbly made with the basic material that was present. And then these people, this delegation of Tamim, they came and they stood at the door and they called out Muhammad, just like that. That's how they used to address the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, by his name. وَقَفُوا عَلَى بَابِ حُجْرَتِهِ فَنَادَوْا يَا مُحَمَّدْ أُخْرُجْ إِلَيْنَا وَكَانُوا إِذَا خَرَجَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ تَقَدَّمُوهُ فِي الْمَاشِيَةِ. Now these guys, this delegation, they stood by the door and they shouted out loud, Ya Muhammad, O Muhammad. And when the Prophet, he came out to see them, they used to walk ahead of the Prophet. Now here this surah was revealed that you don't address the Prophet by his name, you don't walk ahead of the Prophet. The etiquettes and the adab were mentioned. Now when you look into Quran, throughout the Quran, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, who is the creator of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam, and to whom the Prophet, he submits and is so much obedient, that Allah addresses that وَأَشْهَدُ أَنَّ مُحَمَّدًا عَبْدُهُ وَرَسُولُهُ, the servant of Allah, the Almighty God. He addresses Prophet as Ya Ayyuhar Rasul, Ya Ayyuhan Nabi. These are the titles that the Prophet has, and the titles have been observed very dignified, very honorably throughout this glorious Quran. That Allah, he addresses the Prophet as such, and then teaches these people not to shout, not to yell, not to call the Prophet by his name, not to stand at his door and call out loud his name. And when he does come out, and when you're walking with the Prophet in the streets, you don't go ahead of the Prophet. Now all these were the adab. Now if you recall your memories, this also was mentioned, that if you're walking with your father, now those of the fathers who are alive, Allah protect them, save them, and for the children as well, to observe this adab, this etiquette. If you are walking in the streets with your father, you don't walk ahead of him. You be a little bit behind your father, a few steps behind your father. That is that height of adab that is taught to us when it comes to being obedient to the father and respectful towards him. Now someone who observes these little etiquettes towards his own father, then the Prophet being the father of the nation, then definitely he will observe that etiquette towards the Prophet as well. where he says that Ana wa Aliyun abawa hadhihi ummah. I and Ali are the fathers of this nation. So this tribe of Tamim, they used to come and stand and they called out loud, and he addressed the Prophet to come out, and when he came out they used to walk ahead of him. And then the Prophet, when he did used to speak to them, they used to interrupt his conversation, and they said, Ya Muhammad, ma taqulu fi kada wa kada, kama yukallimuna ba'dhum ba'dha. They used to speak to the Prophet, says, what do you say about this topic, about that topic? Just like when they were speaking to anyone else, they used to speak like that to the Prophet. So Allah, He reveals this surah, teaches them the adab, the etiquettes, that فَأَنزَلَ اللَّهُ يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا إِلَى قَوْلِهِ إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يُنَادُونَكَ Banu Tamim. So this was revealed for this tribe of Banu Tamim. So these are some of the fada'il and the virtues of this beautiful surah, and how we should be dealing with Rasulullah, the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, Mujtahideen, Maraja, Ulama, our parents, our fathers, etc. Now, in our deen, that what comes first is obedience. Obedience to Allah, that is the primary and the first adab that has to be observed, where it says that Ati'ullah wa ati'ur Rasul wa ulil amri minkum. Obedience to Allah, obedience to Rasulullah, and obedience to the Imams and those who are in command amongst you. Now, Quran, when you look into it, there is an ayah which says, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Says, certainly we have made this Quran easy for remembrance. It's easy. You can pick up the Quran, recite some of the ayat, and you would find that every ayah, every verse of Quran, there is so much in it. There is so much of information in that. Reminders are mentioned, remembrances are there. But then Quran says, فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. Is there anyone who will mind? So there are people who recite, but they don't understand. So reciting Quran is good, reciting it in a beautiful voice is very good. All these are these adab and etiquettes that are there. But there is a higher aim, and that higher aim is to try to understand what this glorious book is telling us. Now, even in the a'mal that we have for Laylatul Qadr, for example, now if you sometimes have time, open up the Mafatihul Janan. Now all these books also, they are going extinct. No one opens Mafatihul Janan, books of du'as, etc. Everyone wants something fast and rapid, and just press the button and it plays for you. So in the a'mal of 15th of Sha'ban, in the a'mal of Laylatul Qadr, there are so many observances, so many du'as, so many ziyarat, so many prayers, what to do, how much to do in sajda and all that. And then you have a disclaimer, you can say, it's mentioned over there, that the best of actions and a'mal that you can do in all of these great nights, it's to ponder, is to reflect. Take just one ayah of Quran and see what the Almighty Allah wants to say. What do you understand from that? Says just pondering into one of the ayat of Quran, it's far greater and it's far weightier in ajr and thawab than doing all of the observances. We don't want to say that don't do that. Says all of that compared to just pondering into one of the ayat, pondering in that one ayah, it's far weightier and heavier in ajr. A person, he can get to his destinations higher and higher just by thinking and reflecting into these great sayings of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. So Quran, it is the book of Allah, and it is the book of guidance, book for the development of our conscious, book which tells us the reason for this creation. It's a movement, salvation of people, establishment of justice, spiritual freedom, social leadership, perfection of man. All these beautiful statements you can find, aims you can find them in the ayat of Quran. Now, although reciting Quran correctly and with a good tone, with a beautiful voice, all that is highly recommended, but then contemplation on the ayats of Quran and the concepts of Quran, they are far higher in aim and in getting to our destinations and goals. So Quran, it is not only a book that makes a culture, a society available to everyone, it is a book that makes man, forms man, and develops man and brings him to a very, very high rank and a status. So all these are the effects that are there present in the glorious Quran. Now, the image or of this Surat al-Hujurat. So this surah was revealed in Medina and contains 18 verses, and the name is Surat al-Hujurat. Hujurat, it's the plural of Hujra. Hujra means chamber, room. So the chambers. So it is also called Suratul Adab, Suratul Akhlaq. So these are also the other names that we have for this beautiful surah. And why was it named Suratul Hujurat? Because of the humble dwelling and the chambers that were made by Rasulullah. Very simple, with roof made of wood and palm leaves. That was the dwelling of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now all these are the beautiful effects that were there from Islam, and they remained for about 3-4 centuries after Rasulullah, and then gradually everything was destroyed. Now, if that remained, then people would see that someone who is the first person of the entire creation of Allah, that was how humble his dwelling was. Now, the beginning of 3 chapters in Quran, one of them is Suratul Ma'idah, the second is Suratul Hujurat, and the third one is Suratul Mumtahana. These 3 surahs, they all start with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, that is, O you who believe. Now, the adab that is taught to us by the Ma'sumin alayhimus salam, that whenever you are reciting Quran and you come across these ayat that start with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, there quickly you say to yourself, Labbaik. Labbaik, as if God, He is addressing you. That is when you say, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, awfu bil uqud. You say Labbaik within yourself, Labbaik, God, I accept. As if Allah, He is speaking to me. Suratul Ma'idah starts with Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, awfu bil uqud. Means that, O you who believe, fulfill your obligations, your commitments, your agreements. Whatever that agreement is, with whosoever that agreement is with, may he be faithful, may he be faithless, may he be a mu'min, may he be a munafiq, whoever it is. If you have committed something with someone, honor that agreement, fulfill that obligation. So there you have to stand by your word. That is the mandatory command that Allah mentions in Suratul Ma'idah. Now, in Suratul Mumtahana, there the Almighty, He says, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la tattakhizu aduwwi wa aduwwakum awliya. Says, O you who believe, do not take my enemy and your enemy for friends. Now that is one translation of that awliya that has been translated as friends. Now when you look into the tafasir, some of the mufassirin, they have translated this awliya not as a friend but as a custodian. So you cannot, Allah says that, O you who have faith, do not take my enemy and your enemy as your custodian. So the enemy of God is your enemy. And if you are a friend of God and a believer of God, then your enemy is also the enemy of God. And Allah says, don't take them as your custodian. Like what we see in all these Muslim lands, what they have done. It is going to be very soon, they will all turn back onto their heels, and nothing but disgrace and zillat will remain for them. Says, La tattakhizu, do not take my enemy and your enemy as your custodians. Now this custodian, it's a higher level up. Friend also, taking them as a friend, that is also forbidden. Taking them as custodians and taking the command from them, that is a higher sin and a higher crime that is being done. So in either case, Allah forbids that you take them as friends and then take them as custodians, take the commands from them who are the enemies of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And here in this Suratul Hujuraat. So Suratul Mumtahana and then Suratul Ma'idah, and this one it's Suratul Hujurat. In Suratul Hujurat, the Almighty He says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O you who believe, La tuqaddimu, that is, do not venture or do not go ahead. La tuqaddimu, do not precede. Bayna yadayillah wa rasulih, do not go ahead of Allah and His apostle. So always you have to be behind the Prophet. You have to be behind, you have to follow the command of Allah. You have to follow the command of Rasulullah. Now the Ashab of Amirul Mu'mineen Salamullah alayh, the reporter, he says that I saw Amirul Mu'mineen, he was in the farm and he had irrigated the land. So when you've irrigated the land, it's soft. And he says that I saw that there are two people at a distance. One of them is Amirul Mu'mineen, the other one is Salman. He says that when I see them too. But when I see from here, I see only the footsteps of one person. So if it's two people there, then there should be two footsteps as well. And then he says that I was cautious at seeing the footsteps and seeing that how come I see only the footsteps of one person whence there are two people there. He says, I saw from a distance that Salman, he was so cautious in his walk that he placed his feet, his footstep, in the footsteps of the Imam, not ahead of the Imam, not behind, too much behind. Says he was that cautious that even in his walk, that he was careful that he is not ahead of the Imam alayhi salatu wassalam. So that is obedience, that is by practice, that is possible. And then being obedient to Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and to Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Aimma Alayhimus Salam. So in this surah, this ayah which says Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu has been repeated 5 times, which portrays the face and the image of an Islamic society. Says issues have been mentioned in this surah that have not been mentioned in any other surah. First ayah states that do not go ahead of the Prophet and the etiquette of dealing with him and warning those who are rude to the Prophet. Now when you look into the seerah of Jibreel Salamullahi alayhi, now here's the MSN service, or he is the message delivery service and delivers wahi from Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala to Rasulullah, and he is the chief of staff of all of the angels. So among the angels he is the best, and bringing a message from the Almighty Allah to Rasulullah. When he comes here by the house of Rasulullah, he stands at the entrance. And if you've been to Medina, you see that there is Bab Jibreel. And the etiquette that has been taught to us is that you enter the sacred shrine of Rasulullah from Bab Jibreel. But these Mala'in, they have closed that door and they've made it an emergency exit. No one can enter from there. So you enter from a different side. So the adab that was taught to us, that you enter the sacred shrine of Rasulullah from Bab Jibreel, that was the sunnah, the seerah of Jibreel, that he entered from there. So that is the adab. So in dealing, even Jibreel, he observed that he never entered. Upon Rasulullah, he stood there and waited for the Prophet to give him the the permit to enter, and then he entered. And even the same adab was observed by Ma'asum, by him at the house of Amir al-Mu'mineen Hazrat Zahra salamullahi alayha. And the same etiquette we observe when we enter the sacred shrines of Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam, that you stand by the entrance and then you say, Adkhulu ya Allah, may I enter, O Allah. Adkhulu ya Rasulallah, Adkhulu ya Malaikat Allah. May I enter, O Prophet, may I enter the angels that are surrounding here, and they are in charge of this beautiful place. You take permission from every one of the Imams and then you enter. Now here, you definitely, those of you who've been to ziyarat, you have noticed that sometimes when you stand and then you are reciting this izn, dukhul, the entrance permit, to enter the haram, you shiver. Sometimes you feel cold. Sometimes you shake. Sometimes a tear, it rolls down your eyes. Says any one of these indications you have in you, it means that permission has been granted to you and you may now enter. So that is the adab, that before you enter, you stand there and you kiss the door of the ataba. At times you bend down and you kiss the door of the haram and then you enter. That is the adab, that you have to train yourself to be polite towards the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Now the other thing that we learn from this beautiful surah is that mocking, slandering and having suspicion over others, spying, especially on mu'mineen, backbiting, ghibat, which is all of that is forbidden in a faithful society and forbidden in this surah as well. So all these are those actions that will be mentioned in this surah, that in a society of mu'mineen, none of these actions, none of these crimes, none of these sins should exist. So no mocking, no slander, no suspicion. If someone has said something, you believe him. That is, in ja'akum fasiqun bin naba'in fatabayyanu. Someone fasiq has come, a sinner. He's brought in news about someone. There you don't say whatever he is saying is right. No, you fatabayyanu. You don't take his word immediately. You just do your homework and then you change. Now when it comes to mu'mineen and you want to have a negative opinion about someone, that is also forbidden. Hadith says that you have to have 70 different remarks for yourself. And if then you say that maybe the reason why he did not appear, maybe he didn't have a right, maybe 70 different assumptions you have, and then also you have to think whether you can have a negative opinion about a mu'min or not. So that is what is taught to us in this beautiful surah. Suspicion not allowed, spying on mu'mineen not allowed, backbiting not allowed, slander not allowed. So a society that is a society of the mu'mineen, of faithful, it has been designed and mentioned in this template of this beautiful surah. Brotherhood has been mentioned in this surah. See the order, and then how to reform a society, then how to mobilize a society against those who are rebellious, and then if you want to mediate, that mediation also has to be just, and then research has to be done before you have any kind of a suspicion about anyone, determining the superiority, what is the criteria and who should be superior in the society. All of these are things that have been mentioned. It says here, in a faithful community, a society of mu'mineen, that what the criteria that you should be having is the criteria that has been mentioned in Quran, and that is based on taqwa. Whosoever is more muttaqi, whosoever is more God-wary, he should have the upper hand. Now when you see Quran also regarding the custodians of Masjidul Haram, I'm just saying that who is the khadim of Haramain, that is not acceptable. Quran says, in awliya'uhu illa al-muttaqun. Awliya and the custodians are the muttaqeen. Who is muttaqi? Muttaqi is someone who believes one God, who believes in Rasulullah, who believes in the hereafter, is obedient to Allah, is obedient to Rasulullah, he honors, he accepts the glorious Quran, that is muttaqi. If he is muttaqi, then he can be the custodian. In awliya'uhu illa al-muttaqun. So here says that criteria of who should have the upper hand in an Islamic society is someone who is more muttaqi, someone who is God-wary, someone who is pious. So the criteria of all values also has been mentioned in the surah as taqwa. Now that what is beloved is faith, and that what is hated is infidelity, kufr, immorality, sins and all that. That is something which is hated, which is not desired. And the criteria that you should also be having in picking friends is the same criteria, that whosoever is muttaqi, be his friends. Whosoever is sinful, whosoever is a wrongdoer, keep away from him. Now, this surah, it also mentions that in a faithful community of mu'mineen, people, they should be obedient to the Prophet and never expect the Prophet to obey the people. Always submit to the Prophet. Many important points have been mentioned in this beautiful surah. One of them, it starts with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. That is how every surah in this glorious Quran starts and says that كل أمر ذي بال لم يبدأ ببسم الله فهو أبتر. Every task that you embark on or you start without the name of Allah, فهو أبتر. That is incomplete. So if you want a task to be complete, a task to be perfect, whatsoever it is, it has to start in the name of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. And then Bismillah also is one of those beautiful ayat which is very close to Ism Azam. Ism Azam, it's that secret or that name of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. You can find this Bismillah that close to him. Imam Rida alayhi salam, he says that it's so close to Ism Azam, just like the black part, the pupil of your eye, the black part of your eye, how close it is to the white part, says this Ism Azam, it's that close to Bismillah, to the Ism Azam of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala. Now one of the living Urafa of our time is Ayatullah al-Uzma, Shaykh Hassan Zadeh Amuli. In his early 90s, a very honorable person. He says that the first wuzu that you perform during the day, recite 19 times Bismillah throughout the wudu. You've started your wudu, you're pouring water on your face, start saying Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim 19 times, and in those 19 Bismillahs that you have been saying, you complete your wuzu within that time span of those 19 Bismillah. Why 19 Bismillah? Because this Bismillah is made up of 19 letters, and it has that beautiful impact that the first wuzu of yours, when it is embedded with this name of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that will grant Nuraniyya to your entire day, inshallah. So that is Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. And then for the Bismillah and the fadail that we have in riwayat, in ayat of Quran, in the seerah of Ma'asumeen alayhim salam, it is immense, and inshallah, if an opportunity is given, we'll talk on that also later. Now, the first ayah of this Surah Al-Hujuraat, it says that Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yaday Allah wa rasulih wattaqullah innallaha sami'un alim. O you who believe, do not move ahead of Allah and His apostle, and be wary of Allah, be muttaqi. Indeed, Allah, He is all hearing, He is all knowing. Now the points that we learn from this ayah are that this ayah, it protects from making mistakes, from making errors. The desires that people they generally have, they are material or physical. Now, when you are cautious that you have to be within the framework of obedience, and then the desire of being initiative or having innovations, all of these things, they exist in human beings. Being that excitement of hasty judgments, the idea of free thinking, now all these are things that exist in man. But then we have to regulate them, we have to control them, that we don't just allow anything to come to our mind and then make up its mind and do whatever it wants. No, we have to regulate that, and that is what is being mentioned over here. La tuqaddimu, don't move ahead. Now, we have so many examples that can be mentioned. People, they used to come and ask the Imam for du'as. For example, in one of the sayings, Imam as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he teaches a dua to someone. He was ill. Say, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Ya Allahu, Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. In another quote says, rub your right hand on your chest and say, Ya Allahu, Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, Ya muqallib al-qulub, thabbit qalbi ala dinik. Then the reporter who learned this dua from the Imam, he started saying that Ya Allahu, Ya Rahmanu, Ya Rahim, Ya Muqallib al-Qulub wal-Absar Thabbit. Imam says just that much, Ya Muqallib al-Qulub. Now you don't need to add things to what the Prophet or the Imams have said. Muqallib al-Qulub wal-Absar. He did not say, although when you look into the meaning, it isn't anything against. But then the adab that is taught to us, that is not being observed. So adab is that much, what the Imam has taught, you just do and abide by them. Or when it comes to performing wudu, when it comes to performing ghusl, there are so many things that people they have added on to the program that Deen has laid and made. We don't need to do that. Whatever has been said to us to do, that is what we have to do, not more than that. Now, many a times man, he makes decisions and he precedes the will of God, the will of Rasulullah, and sometimes in worship, for example. The first one who trespassed and who went away was Iblis. When Allah said bow down before Adam, he was the first one who objected. And then he says that allow me not to bow down before Adam, and then if you allow me, I'll worship a worshipping, an ibadah I will perform. No one in this creation of yours has such worshipped you. Allah said to Iblis that I want you to worship as I say, not as you wish, not as you please. So worship means obedience to Allah. In obedience to Allah, I have to worship Him. In obedience to Allah, if there is disobedience, then that is not worship. Many a times this question is asked, how come if a husband is forcing a woman to, for example, abandon her hijab, what do? So here, la ta'ata li makhluq fi ma'siyat al-khaliq. The ruling is that you don't obey a makhluk when there is disobedience to the Creator. Always the criteria is God. If parents, they say, God forbid, don't say your prayers, sleep now. Sleep, you have to have an 8-hour sleep. And then whenever you can later. Here you don't obey your parents. See here, very politely, you stand, you say your prayers, and then you go to bed. So always it is the command of Allah that has to be first. And if we make it a habit to be obedient to Allah in all walks of life, everything will open up properly and these outlets will be formed in an amazing manner. Now, if you recall your memories just 30-40 minutes ago, that the fadila that was mentioned for reciting the Surat al-Hujuraat, the Imam mentioned that outlets will be formed for you in an amazing way, that when you recite the surah sincerely. That is because of that obedience factor. And for this obedience, Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, He says that Yabna Adam, Ana ghaniyun la aftaqir, Ati'ani fima amartuk, Aj'aluka غَنِيًّا لَا تَفْتَقِرْ. Says, O sons of Adam, I am that rich who is never needy. You be obedient to me, I will make you rich. You will never be needy. So obedience. With that obedience you will be rich. He says, Yabna Adam, Ana hayyun la amut, ati'ani fima amartuk, aj'aluka hayyan la tamut. Says, I am that living who never dies. You be obedient to me, I will make you living, you will never die. And then he says that, Yabna Adam, Ana aqulu li shay'in kun fayakun. That I say be to something and it is and it becomes. You be obedient to me and I will give you this kun fayakun to you, so that you also would say and you would intend something and it will be and become for you and it will happen for you. That is also as a result of obedience. Now all these great personalities that we talk about, to whatever rank they have arrived, it is as a result of obedience. We cannot say that we can be and arrive at these high ranks of mysticism and irfan without obedience. Impossible. There is no one more arif, more mystic than the Prophet. And why is he at that rank? Because of the height of obedience that he has. Marhum Allama Tabatabai, the author of Tafsir al-Mizan, he says that when I was young, in my early 20s in Najaf, and I was with my Ustad, Marhum Ayatullah Qazi Tabatabai, and we were walking to Masjid Kufa. Says, amidst our walk to Masjid Kufa, I had questions I was asking, he was replying to me, and on our way I saw a huge big snake in front of me. He says that my Ustad, Marhum Qazi Tabatabai, was with me and I was scared at seeing that snake. He says he was explaining to me some issue, and all of a sudden I see that amidst his explanation he said Mut bi'iznillah to the snake. Mut bi'iznillah means die by the command of Allah. He says that snake, it died. It perished in front of him in a fraction of a second. That is that as a result of obedience, Allah gives this might and that tawfiq and these abilities to some because of obedience. When he says that, O sons of Adam, you be obedient to me and I will make you like myself. I say be to something and it becomes, and I will make you say and intend be and it will become for you. So that is that obedience. So in an Islamic society that Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is talking and mentioning in this surah, says if it is zuhd, piety, that has to be again in line with obedience. Now, people, they don't get married nowadays. They say not 20s, 30s, 35s, 40s, they don't get married for whatever lame reasons they come up with. Now, a similar situation was there during the time of Rasulullah. People, they came to the Prophet and they said that we don't want to get married. Now, because when we marry, we have all these desires towards women and all those relationships, etc. So why don't you do something that we be barren and we have no desire towards the opposite gender? Rasulullah says, no, you can't do that. You have to be within the society. And then he says, there is a lengthy hadith that he recites, and he says that I am living with you like you in the society. I have wife, I have children, I have my family, I have all these desires. I eat and I drink and I dwell and I wear and everything that everyone else does, I also do. So then he says that an-nikahu sunnati faman raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni. Nikah, getting married, is my sunnah, it's my way of life, and whoever turns away from this my way of life, falaysa minni, he is not from me. So he says that you have to be in the society, you have to be married, you have to have spouse, you have to have children. That is the way of life. Or people, when they saw the Prophet, he worships, Amirul Mu'mineen, he worships, they also abandoned everything and they came and started worshipping in the mosque. And it was time for work. Rasulullah comes to the mosque and sees people, they are worshipping at this time. He asks that, who are you? What kind of a people are you? What are you doing in the mosque now? They said, Nahnul mutawakkilun, we trust and rely upon God. We heard an ayah has been revealed, which says that whosoever relies upon Allah, Allah is sufficient for him. The Prophet, he told them off. He says that you are a burden on the society. Antumul mutawakki'un. You are a burden on the society, not that you rely and you depend upon Allah. So depending and relying upon Allah doesn't mean that you abandon everything and you sit in the mosque. No. So that is لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. So you don't go ahead. So here in worship, they preceded the Prophet. There on those family structure, they went ahead. And they sought refuge in mountains and caves to be away from from those temptations and relationships. So here says that you can't do that. You have to be in the society and you have to follow the Prophet in all his teachings. لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. So may that be piety, may that be zuhud, may that be that simplicity in how you live and how you dwell. Now when you look into Quran and the ayat that inshallah we will be reciting from this surah, the Almighty Allah, He is training the human being so that they be trained like angels. Now angels are the creation of Allah. لا يسبقونه بالقول وهم بأمره يعملون. That angels, they don't venture, they don't speak ahead of Him, and they act by His command. Allah wants to make the human beings like the angels. That is, we have to train ourselves and be like the angels. That is, just like angels who do not go against the divine command of the Almighty Allah, we also have to arrive at a rank that we also never go against the command of the Almighty Allah. So that is what this surah is saying. لا تقدموا بين يدي الله. Don't go ahead. Don't precede. You always follow the Prophet. Whatever you want, you have to ask the Prophet for. Now Quran, it does not specify any specific precedence over here in this here, but states that you always have to follow the Prophet. May that be in ideological issues, in your aqidah, you follow the Prophet. In scientific matters, you follow the Prophet. In political issues, you follow the Prophet. If the Prophet has appointed Amirul Mu'mineen as his successor, you don't go against the will of the Prophet. You follow the Prophet and you accept whoever he has appointed as the successor. So here in economical issues it's the same. When he says the khums has to be given, khums has to be given. In speech, in action, in every matter, you have to be behind the Prophet. You have to follow the Prophet. Now some of the companions, they asked the Prophet to allow them to go against what he is saying. Rasulullah, he says no. If you want to be in Islam, if you want to serve Islam, you have to follow. And all of these actions also that many of the ashab and companions they used to commit and perform, Rasulullah, he did not allow. Now one who surpasses God and his Prophet, he disrupts the management of the system. Now here Rasulullah has been placed as the head of the society. Amirul Mu'mineen as the head of the society after him, and today it's Imam al-Asr alayhi salam. He's the head of the management of affairs. Now someone who goes against this system that Rasulullah has laid and made, he is disrupting the society. He's causing a chaos in the society, and then everything goes against and everything falls apart. So that is what is being told to us in this surah, and the first ayah of this surah, saying that لا تقدموا بين يدي الله ورسوله. That is, O you who believe, do not go ahead of, do not precede the command of Allah, O you who have faith, do not move ahead of Allah Ta'ala and His Apostle, and be wary of Allah. Indeed, Allah is all hearing and all knowing. Inshallah, we'll continue with the other ayat in the forthcoming weeks. May Allah Ta'ala help us understand these beautiful ayat and teachings of Ma'asumeen alayhimus salam and help us apply them in our everyday life, inshaAllah. Suratul Hujuraat, Surah number 49. Recite it and you'll see how beautiful all these commands and messages have been mentioned. وَسُبْحَانَ رَبِّكَ رَبِّ الْعِزَّةِ عَمَّا يَصِفُونَ وَسَلَامٌ عَلَى الْمُرْسَلِينَ وَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم.